Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important. We have our store cupboard staples at the end of each episode. We'll also learn more about lifestyle tips and therapies to help you to influence your health in a positive way. Now, if you've ever practiced yoga, you are more than likely aware of the term Ayurveda. But in case you haven't come across it, the word literally means knowledge of life. Ayurveda is actually the world's oldest system of natural health, with roots tracing back more than 6,000 years. It originated in India, and this holistic healing tradition is centered on balancing the body's energies to create lasting health and vitality. It offers a complete approach to wellness, weaving together nutrition, lifestyle, herbal remedies, and spiritual practices. Our guest on Alimentary today, Nidhi Pandya, is an Ayurvedic doctor, international speaker, educator, and author of the book Your Body Already Knows. Nidhi's passion lies in empowering us to become self-aware and live intuitively, achieving mind-body balance. She has gained popularity online and has become known for distilling complex ancient scriptures into practical advice for our modern day life. Her inner climate method, taught globally, focuses on realigning the mind and the body for optimal health, healing, and longevity. I've been very eager to learn more about Ayurveda and just see if I can incorporate some Ayurvedic principles or practices into my own life. So I was delighted to get the opportunity to talk to her. Now, even if this is just your introduction to Ayurveda, I know that you will be inspired by her to consider your health holistically, and I'm sure that you're going to enjoy my conversation with Nidhi Pandya. Nidhi, it is absolutely lovely to have you on the podcast, and I'm very excited to talk to you. I have a real curiosity about Ayurveda, a real interest in it, so I'm really looking forward to getting some of the inside scoop from yourself, and a bit more of an understanding about Ayurvedic lifestyles and principles and everything. But I was wondering if maybe we could start with if you wouldn't mind sharing the story about your upbringing in India and how your grandfather's influence shaped your path in Ayurveda.
So firstly, thank you for having me, Lynn. I'm excited. I'm always excited to talk about Ayurveda, but especially to somebody who's been curious about this subject since before. So thank you. I will talk about my upbringing because it's really where I learned the basics, the foundations of Ayurveda before I went on to get my formal education. So I was raised in a large family, Lynn, with 14 members under a roof. And my grandfather, as you may know, was an Ayurvedic healer. And a lot of families in India practice Ayurveda, whether they know it or they don't know it. It makes it into part of our food, our lifestyle, how we live seasonally. So that happens for a lot of people. But the reason why it was different for me is to actually have an Ayurvedic healer at home who was so connected with the Sanskrit texts, who had people lining up. We had people lining up in our household, to get their pulse read, to get treatments. Like as a little child, I saw this crazy world and this really fascinating world around me. But not only that, right, Lynn? His philosophy kind of infiltrated into how we live every day. So I always say that I learned Ayurveda like a first language, which means that it was never taught to me through instruction or specific commands, like according to Ayurveda, but it was just the only way we knew how to live. So the examples that I often use is that, instead of saying mom, instead of saying come home at 7 p.m. from the playground, they would say that come back when you see the bats weaving through the sky. Now that would look different in the winter, it would look different in the summer, but it also gave me this indication that, there's species that actually are more active in the evening. So I started learning about circadian rhythms and human cycles right there and then. Or for example, them saying that, hey, are you sure you want to eat cheese at night? Isn't going to be heavier to digest? Now that again gave me, my subconscious mind was reading all the time. And it told me that, cheese may be heavy to digest, but these other foods that are offered to me during the evening time, they may be easier on my gut. And if I'm offered cheese in the daytime, it means the daytime is probably easier for us to digest food. So you don't realize, but you're learning a ton like that. One last thing I'll say is that I also learned bio individuality growing up with so many people, seeing that we often received the same stimulus, but we responded differently. And, we were five girls in the family. And my grandfather would often say things like, hey, to one of my cousins, you be careful when you go out in the sun because you can get overheated pretty quickly. So here, my entire family, I felt like my home was my laboratory. It was my playground. It is where I learned so much about life. And of course, then that took me to the desire of wanting to get a formal education in Ayurveda.
Mm. So, what's lovely about that is that it's not that anybody was preaching to you as such. It's just as you said, it's in your daily habits, but it's also like in your DNA, really, too, isn't it? Because your subconscious knows why you're doing it, and it's like when I talk to people about creating new habits, it's like brushing your teeth. We don't think about brushing our teeth, or other habits that we have. So really, it's not a stress to do it. Even though there are all of these things that you probably carry out on a daily basis, it's just what you do.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think when you learn it like that, it's not like a to-do. It's not something that feels like a task. It's just such a part of how you live that it's
Yeah.
almost effortless. And when
Yeah.
it's not preached, the minute it becomes a dogma, and
Yeah.
if it's not connected to the rhythms and the cycles of nature, and it's a dogma, then your mind resists it. But
Mm.
when it's taught in a manner which is so deeply connected to how the world works, it's just
Yes.
this universal command.
Mm. And so then when you went to, obviously you had been learning from your grandfather, just through watching him. But when you went to to study formally, did you find that was a different experience, or were there any principles that were slightly different, or how did that sit with you?
Yeah, honestly, with my education, I was fascinated.
Mm.
Every single day is a eureka moment. Even now, right? Like the only way to be in touch with Ayurveda is to continue to study. So even now, I'll open up my textbooks, like the ancient Ayurvedic texts, and I'll try and read a few verses every now and then. And each time you find yourself like just being blown away. So honestly, while I had so much of my foundation, I think the foundation gave me a lens, a certain view, so that when I went on to study, I could really look beneath. If anything sounded prescriptive, I could look beneath and understand the principles behind it.
Mm.
And no, there wasn't much disparity. That's the beauty of Ayurveda, that the prescriptions sometimes can look different, but the principles are the same because they're so deeply connected to the principles of nature. Gravity is gravity, wherever you are in Timbuktu or in New York or where you are in Ireland. So it's like that. And I am just continuously fascinated. So I will be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed my formal education. It was just fascinating and it continues to be.
Mm. It always amazes me the ancient wisdom, before we had scientific laboratories and microscopes and everything. When you look at how ancient, hundreds of years ago, populations that knew about different herbs and spices and what they did, that's totally fascinating to me as well. So it seems like Ayurveda is one of the oldest. Would that be right? It's one of the oldest traditions when it comes to healing.
It's probably one of the oldest, but it's
Yeah.
also, I think the reason why it makes it so special is because a lot of the literature is preserved. Even though about 30-40% is destroyed, we still have a lot remaining. I'm certain that other traditions and cultures, when I look at how they live, I can tell that they understood these principles, right? Because they're principles connected to life. Whether you can call it Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, Greek medicine, they all have the same underlying principles.
Yeah.
And Ayurveda has just preserved them so deeply.
Okay.
And I have spent a lot of time being preoccupied with how did they know, but how did they know? And then if you go back and you look at, for example, even Helen Keller, like if you study Helen Keller's autobiography, and you're told that she could tell from a mile away who's coming, just like she could hear the sound. So basically, because she was blind and she couldn't see, her other senses heightened, and there was an inward presence. She relied on her inner compass. And then when you look at Ayurveda and all of this ancient Vedic wisdom, how they knew and how it's actually enumerated in so much detail is that when your senses are not so preoccupied by the world outside, and you can really connect with the object that you're studying, even if it's an herb, right? And you smell it and you awaken your instinct. When you shut down your intellect and your thinking brain, you can connect with substances deeper. That's how everything in nature knows each other, right? Like animals know when to wake up, they know how to live without ever using, they don't have an intellect like we do because they're so connected to their instinct. So these Ayurvedic sage scientists, they just knew through their own practice and steadiness and that journey of going inwards, plus connecting to the rhythms of their land, what how to live. And it's exactly like a deer will not do experiment with like, should I eat grass in the morning or pineapples? Like deer know, for example. And so we know as human beings, and we've just forgotten. So it's fascinating to go back to this science, Ayurvedic science, and see everything. Like, for example, I just want to say one thing, Lynn, which is really was so fascinating to me. These are textbooks, 3,000, at least anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 year old textbooks.
Wow.
And it's, there's a verse that precisely talks about, so it talks about fertility and conception. It's that chapter, very precise, no code words, no, you cannot interpret it in any other way. It's like very precise. So it talks about the 12th night after the first day of your periods as the night for conception. Now, this is at a time when we didn't understand ovulation. We didn't understand how this happens, the whole process of life. But these scientists knew, and they talked about the egg, and they talked about the sperm, and they talked about ovulation. They talked about that during the time of ovulation, a woman's eyelids become heavier, her cheeks become, a little bit more fluid. And so basically, when you're in that phase of your cycle, all the symptoms that we know that happen, so you can attract a mate, but it enumerates it in such great detail. So when you see this level of precision, you know that there is a science beyond the five senses, which are anyway so limited. So even if you cannot prove things in a laboratory today, right, because of the limitations of our own senses and our own intellect, and then you see all of this, that you know already that it's an advanced science.
I mean, we see what we expect to see, don't we?
Yeah. So
When we're using our thinking brain, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Are there any misconceptions that you come across often about Ayurveda in the West?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I think there's a few. One is that you have to have a very Indian lifestyle, that you have to consume turmeric and you have to eat things like khichdi, which is this famous rice and lentil dish. None of that is true. Ayurveda is simply understanding what are the patterns of the universe around you, whether it's the season or what are the patterns that are inside your body, and then what is an antidote to it? What is going to support it? So, for example, if turmeric could be an elixir for somebody, but it could also be poison for another person. The only thing that is Ayurvedic is something that you've consumed mindfully to balance your rhythms, to balance what I call your inner climate. And when you can, without that connection, anything you do is not Ayurvedic. So you could have never eaten turmeric or anything Indian, but you understand these principles and you can live Ayurvedically. So this is, a great relief to a lot of the people that I work with because they assume that they have to live a certain way and they have to eat certain foods. You don't have to. You can eat what you want. But a second misconception is this, that there are some ingredients from Ayurveda that have become very popular in the West. Ashwagandha, for example, berberis, daru haridra, uh, rhodiola. So there's a few different ingredients, right? Herbs that Ayurveda talks about those. But to consume those in isolation, in powdered form, is not Ayurvedic at all. It's something that we wouldn't dream or dare of doing. Every herb needs to be processed and naturally processed in a certain way, combined sometimes with other herbs to make it more digestible and effective in the body. I mean, it's such a nuanced science. You will be amazed, Lynn, that it talks about how each herb needs to be processed, combined. What are you going to take it with? Not all herbs are taken with just water. Like some are mixed with pomegranate juice, some are mixed with honey, some are consumed with milk. And there's such great detail in that that is completely missing from how we're using Ayurveda today.
So yeah, so I mean, a lot of these herbs are available as supplements now, and I suppose in terms of selling those supplements, people are looking for a quick fix, really, aren't they? So what you're saying is that really it's about context and it's about lifestyle more than one particular supplement.
Yeah, and then also sometimes it is about the supplement, but the supplements are not taken in the way that they're advocated today. The
Okay.
supplements have a certain way of being processed, of being, so that they're more effective, but they're also easily digestible because everything does have to be metabolized by your liver, and you don't want to give it substances that it's not going to be able to work on detoxifying eventually, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the herbs are detoxified, they're processed, and they're about like 8 or 12 different what we call timings of taking herbs. So then it's like, do you take it before your meal? Do you take it after your meal? Do you take it in the middle of your meal? Do you take it with one every bite? I mean, it is such a nuanced and detailed science, and I think that's gone completely missing from how we're using these herbs. And that's why sometimes you'll hear that suddenly some herb is like the next superfood, and then after a few years, 2 or 3 years, you'll hear that, oh, studies have shown that this is, increased this testosterone in these little girls, and they've had this other issue. And I had this with ashwagandha, right? Like this one little girl was taking ashwagandha, and she had this crazy reaction, and all her hormones started fluctuating, and she came to me, and I was like, oh my God, it is from the ashwagandha, and then it was verified by her doctor.
Mm.
But I'm saying that so we want to be careful about how we use these supplements. And that is not Ayurvedic. Just using a supplement blindly, reading the label on it is not Ayurvedic.
Okay. Are there any, I suppose, ancient Ayurvedic principles that we could, in terms of lifestyle, that we could apply to our modern stressful lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some very few simple principles that really go a long way. And I think one of them is that you want to live according to the cycle of the sun. But that's not just sleeping, right? Most people think about like, well, I'll wake up with the sun and I'll sleep with the sun. But I'm just going to take you through a simple rundown of what we call the 6 phases of the day in Ayurveda. And it's profound. But before we even do that, right, so that it does not become prescriptive, I want to remind people that we are diurnal mammals, right, which means we rise with the sun and we sleep with the sun. So our body, our biochemistry has a deep connection with the sun. That's one thing you want to remember. And the second thing you want to remember is that philosophers from time to time, they've said that as above, so below, as is the macro, such is the micro. And that's a very fundamental principle of Ayurveda. So you want to look outside to see what happens inside. So let's take the 6 cycles of the day. The first cycle is from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. When you look outside in those early morning hours, when the sun is barely rising, the earth is beginning to get warm. And if you walk on grass, you see it's a little dewy, it's a little wet. The earth is still sluggish. That's exactly the experience our body is having. We're still waking up, the fire in our belly, the fire in our nervous system is still picking up, and the body can be slightly wet and congested, a little extra mucus, if you may. And so people can wake up with their nasal congestion in the morning. If you want to show off in a yoga class, it's not the time to do it because your synovial fluids, your joints are padded, right? So very similar to what's happening outside. What as a result should we be doing during those hours before 10 o'clock? You want to exercise, you want to get your body warmed up, and you want to eat a warm breakfast. Most traditions, blue zones, eat warm breakfast. The whole idea of eating fruit and cold smoothies and cold protein shakes is very new. And they kind of set off that warmth that you need to get through your day. We need that fire to get through the day. Kind of it's just it fizzles out if you eat something cold in the morning. So exercise, consume a small warm breakfast. Something fermented is fine too because it's very warming. Between the hours of 10 and 2, as the sun peaks in the sky, our fire in our nervous system and fire in the belly peaks, which means our digestive system is at its best. Eat your largest meal for lunch. Gastrin, which is your digestive enzymes, and your insulin sensitivity is at its highest. You can eat sugar and break it down much easier. But it's also the time we do our most focused work, most collaborative work, in the universe. We work with people. So lunch, it's that time you eat, you do your work, everything that's busy that keeps you occupied with people outside and eat your biggest meal. It's the most forgiving. From 2 to 6, as the wind sets in outside, but if you look outside, the sun begins to, lower its impact on the planet and it gets slightly windy. It's exactly what happens in the body. Around 4 o'clock, you'll hear people yawning, stretching, kind of feeling that evening lull. Great time to go for a little walk, to do some breath work, to have some peppermint tea, but also to remind yourself that the body really wants to start slowing down. Most often, people go for that one extra cup of coffee, for that afternoon
Mm.
lull. You're technically extending your day in a way that it's not healthy because what the body is literally doing, it's changing its entire biochemistry from daytime juices, which are the excitatory mediators. It's actually going to inhibitory mediators, completely different. Melatonin, GABA, all of those set in those evening hours. So between 2 and 6, as closer to 6, you want to remind yourself of slowing down. 6 o'clock before the sun sets is when you should eat your dinner or supper, and it's a very small meal. Before we had electricity, our ancestors did not do big late dinners. They just couldn't. And this is 100 years ago. And we did not have chronic disease to this level back then, naturally so, because they lived according to that. So I'd say finish your food at 6 o'clock. And between 6 and 10, you want to start slowing down as the sun sets, as diurnal species return back home, as birds fly into their nests, diurnal birds fly into their nests, as flowers close down, your time to gradually start making that closing so that between 10 and 2, you can stay deep in bed where your body conducts metabolic repair and it goes really deep. It cleans up your intellect. Thinking also produces debris. Your body cleans that up, generates new cell. What a beautiful time for repair. Usually around 2 a.m. at night, people can wake up, breaking in a sweat, or people want to urinate. That's usually the sign that this cycle is kind of over, of the repair. And then there's new regeneration that occurs between 2 and 6. And then 6 o'clock is a great time for most people to kind of wake up and get their fire going. And now, of course, this is assuming that you're living somewhere close to, the first two latitudes of the equator. And it changes a little bit depending on the summer and winter. But pretty much you can say as an estimate, this is true for most.
Mm.
So you want to live as much as you can according to the cycle of the sun and the moon. Now, I understand that people cannot do it overnight, but once you have this, once you're in awe of how the universe works and you start noticing other species, what does happen is that very naturally you feel inclined, like you said, right? Like brushing your teeth is second nature. The more you are in awe of what's happening outside in nature, the easier it becomes then to start imbibing some of these principles into your own life without it being an effort.
Mm. So, you know, the way some people might say, oh, I'm a night owl. I come awake at 10 o'clock, and then they maybe go to bed about 2 and they sleep in later. Um, I mean, is it just that their circadian rhythm is out of whack? Like, can people be night owls, or is it literally back to that circadian rhythm just needing to be reset?
If you're an owl, you can be a night owl. If you're a human being, you can be a night owl, right? I mean,
Yeah,
our ancestors, I highly doubt that, people were like, oh,
mm,
while everybody else is sleeping and there's no electricity, I'm going to just keep oiling my lamp and stay up and stargaze. I
yeah.
mean, we all do it once in a while, but
Mm,
I'm sure the ancestors did that once in a while, but that's really not a way of living. People who call themselves night owls are far too distracted in the day,
mm.
and their only time that they can find time to themselves is the night time. So they're probably doing some caffeine and they've disrupted their circadian rhythm so that they can actually stay up and use this time for their creativity, introspection, whatever that is.
Yeah. So I know that you have created this inner climate framework, Nidhi, and I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about the background of that, and I suppose the core philosophy behind it, and how it maybe merges with the ancient wisdom and modern science. Is it a bit of a crossover?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. So, Lynn, the whole idea, right? Why does life exist only on our planet and no other planet? Because the climate is right, right? Every time you're looking at another planet to see if life exists, you look at the atmospheric pressure, you look at water, you look at sunlight. I mean, if you have to give it one word, it's the ecosystem is not right. Now, on our planet, our little planet, the number 3 from the whole solar system in this entire Milky Way galaxy where life exists, I mean, by chance is because the climate was right. So we already know that life exists when climate is right. Not only does it exist, it thrives. We were single cell organisms 4.5 billion years ago, kept evolving into this whole like Look at the flora and fauna on our planet. And now when the climate is wrong, we know that our planet is under threat. Right? So universal law, you try to take a seed of tomato and plant it on the North Pole, wrong climate, not going to happen. Like there's certain plants that I've wanted to grow at some point in my backyard. And I was like, I can't grow them because I live in New York and it's far too cold, right? So we always subconsciously we know that. We know that climate means everything. Now, our body, which is a universe to these microorganisms, the microbiome, that today we are realizing really our life depends on their life, right? Whether it's our digestive system, our nervous system, our reproduction, our hormones, how we think, they basically, we are the universe. And they survive in a certain climate, just like every other species. When the climate is off, life goes off. What scientists have been calling homeostasis for a long time can be understood as this optimum inner climate. So, my inner climate framework explains what that optimum inner climate is, and I'll do that very briefly for the audiences who are listening. Right? So, how is our breath? I'd like anyone who's listening to this, you can take your palm, cup it around your mouth and exhale into it a few times and tell me what you sense.
Well, warmth and moisture.
Warm and moist. I didn't say these words, you said them, warm
Hmm.
and moist, right? How does love feel?
Warm. Yeah.
Warm and moist. Uh, if anybody's nursed, it's been a nursing mother, mother's milk is warm and moist. Our blood is warm and moist. We are warm-blooded mammals, right? Our reproductive fluids are warm and moist. Our probiotic environment that was previously called flora and fauna. Flora and fauna grows in places on the planet, the best when it's warm and moist. The kind of people that we like, right? We don't like hot-tempered people. We don't like cold people. We like warm people. We like our room temperature to be not too cold, not too hot, perfectly moist. Sorry, perfectly warm. We don't like our hands to be too dry or too sticky. We want it to be moist. That's why moisturizer. So, without knowing, human beings all gravitate towards warm and moist. It's really even our planet, the balance of the sun and the moon, make it this warm and moist place where life exists abundantly on the planet, is places that are warm and moist. And in our own bodies, that optimal climate is warm and moist. In fact, even in our nervous system, right? Anger is too hot. Depression is too like stagnant, too sluggish. But love, gratitude, compassion, so warm and moist. Stress and anxiety can be hot and dry. Now, if you look at disease conditions, right, like they all fall in the same. Inflammation is too hot, for example, right? Uh, all disease conditions can be classified into an imbalanced inner climate. Even symptoms can, you can see somebody's period is really slow and sluggish, and they have all this mucus that's just gone too sluggish. So whether a climate has become hot, humid, and cold and humid, hot and dry, cold and dry, these are all imbalances. The center point of warm and moist. So the inner climate framework teaches you to identify your own inner climate, how it's gone off. And then you start realizing suddenly, like I have clients who'll be like, oh my God, my red eye, like for example, I'm thinking of a client as I'm talking, Lynn. I had a client and she was like, oh my God, everything in my life is connected. She's like, she had she had this eye autoimmune condition where her eyes would become really red and dry. And she's like, my eyes are hot and dry. My skin sensitivity to the skin is hot and dry. Her burning in her digestive system is hot and dry. Her rosacea was hot and
Mm.
dry. Her personality, she's like, I'm so angry with my husband all the time. That is hot and dry. And she's burnt out at work. Again, that's hot and dry. So once you start understanding your inner climate, the inner climate framework teaches you to understand your inner climate and then start bringing yourself back to the center of warm and moist through your foods, through your lifestyles, through breath work, through reconfiguration of how you live. And it just offers this tremendous opportunity for healing, but a large model healing, not fragmented.
Very good. So really you're talking about building healthier habits. It isn't just about the food you eat or just about sleep or just about any one thing. It's really how you live your day from you get up till you go to bed. It's all of those small habits that you can build up over time.
That is correct, right, Lynn? And yet I tell people to, sometimes it can feel very overwhelming to
Mm,
think of like I have to create habits. So I always teach people to let habits happen through deep connection, through connection. Like, for example, right, Len, if you were feeling cold and you understood that you were feeling cold, you just put on a sweater. You know that. And it's not like, oh my God, now I'm cold. Now let me look in
mm,
my manual and say, what do I need to do? I have to create this habit of wearing a sweater. No, you just put on a sweater. You know it because you're connected to the cold and you're connected to, what it's going to take. So the more, my way of teaching people is to stay in that deep connection, to understand the rhythms and the cycles and understand your symptoms. And as a result, right? So very often, just as Lynn, you said warm and moist to the breath, right? When I work with people, I tell them, like for example, I'll ask them what food, not in temperature, but like literally in its qualities feels cooling. I'm going to ask you this question, right? For example, would coconut feel more cooling or strawberries feel more cooling?
strawberries.
If you think of cold strawberries, but if you think about like a
Oh yeah.
food, there was not, maybe that was a confusing question, but I'd say, would coconut feel more cooling, or let's say, kimchi would feel more cooling,
Oh, coconut. Yeah,
right? So,
yeah, I keep my strawberries in the fridge, so you're right. That's
yeah,
what
yes,
I'm thinking of.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But like that tart, right? Like if you were to
Yeah.
use strawberries on like a bruise, if you were bruised,
Yeah.
if your lips were bruised and you had a strawberry, it would sting a little bit. So that's heat right there, right? But
Mm,
if you were bruised and accidentally a whole blob of coconut fell on it, like coconut meat, the flesh, it would feel nice and soothing, right?
yeah.
So we understand these things.
I get it. Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So once you understand your inner climate and you start
Mm,
making associations with behaviors, even, right? For example, I was working with a client, this Harvard lawyer, ex-lawyer, fully burnt out. And she became a friend of mine, but I met her in a hot yoga class. And when I spoke to her, she had quit her job because she was burnt out. So she quit being a lawyer. And then she said that her doctor asked her to do yoga. And guess what she chose? Because she did not have that connection, she chose hot yoga. So she
mm,
already was feeling burnt out. But had she known that her inner climate was already so hot and dry, and that's how the burnout is literally, she
mm,
wouldn't have chosen the hot yoga. So we need to start understanding our climate and we need to start understanding what will help, whether it's not just the foods we eat, it's the behaviors we adopt, it's the conversations we engage in. Now, if
mm.
the same client of mine would watch news every day and watch news of war every day, her nervous system is going to be set on fire even further. But now, if she understands that her nervous system is hot and dry, and I offer her to go lay down in grass for some time every day or gaze at the moonlight, that automatically feels so lunar. It feels so cooling to her. So identification, and identification of your inner climate. Because by the same token, there are people, Lane, for years they're in depression. They're so sluggish. They're mucusy all the time. They have this plaque, and they've gone on the other side of moist. They've gone to humid and sticky. They need the stimulation. They need to wake up. They need to be inspired. So each person has a different inner climate, because we've lived out of balance for so long. So we all want to come to the optimum. So the inner climate framework basically offers you that opportunity.
So what you're doing is you're giving people the knowledge so that they can they're not really it's not a big stress to make a decision. The knowledge is embedded, so it's just a natural thing to do.
So beautifully said, right? Because otherwise, all we get is information.
Mm,
And information is from this front part of your brain. I mean, by the time it's like many layers before it actually makes it. But
mm.
knowledge, wisdom, instinct, they come from within you. They come from a deeper place, a different part of your brain entirely. They're felt in your body. And the minute you can feel it in your body, and it comes from a different part of your brain, and you don't have to do anything about it. It stays with you. It stays with you from, where what I believe lifetimes, not even in just this life.
Yeah. And so the doshas, Nidhi, are the isn't that Vata, Pitta, and I can't remember the third
Kapha.
one, Kapha.
Yeah.
Is that when you're talking about heat and cool, is that related to those doshas?
That's absolutely correct, right? So Ayurveda talks about these three doshas. And people do like a dosha quiz, which means people try to identify what their dosha is, which means which what is their climate? Like that's a better way of putting it, right? I think
Mhm.
dosha can be. I am trying to get the world to move away from this language of doshas because it's just jargon, right?
Yeah.
But like for example, somebody with a kapha dominance has a very sluggish, cold, dense climate. Somebody with a pitta dominance has a very hot and potentially humid climate in their body, like a tropical, like a really tropical place, and just parasites and bugs and sun and heat and itch and all that. And then somebody with like a cold and dry, like a cold and dry desert where nothing grows, has a vata climate. These are all three of them offer certain functions in your body. So you have kapha elements that will help you to build, you have pitta elements that will help you to metabolize, and you have vata elements that will allow movement in the body and then drying of substances and evacuation of substances. They all have their functions, but if your body becomes overly dominant in one, then the climate goes off balance. But the point of where all three of them are in equal proportion, or as you should be building, you should be transforming, and you should have the ability to for things to depreciate as they need to. All three doshas are working well. That ideal climate is warm and moist. So when they're
Yeah.
warm and your body has that climate of warm and moist, all three doshas are in perfect harmony and balance.
So it's actually a really good way of putting it because we all understand climate. You're not
Yeah.
trying to remember terms, that's actually a clever way of doing it. I know that empowering women to live intuitively, as you've described there, and become self-aware is a central part of your mission, I guess, with this framework. How did that come about?
So is the question that how did I start working with women to do this? Is that the
Yes,
question?
yes.
Because I realized, firstly, all the people that I attracted, all my clients were women, and I particularly enjoyed working with women because we are the carriers of generational trauma, generational wisdom. We really have the power to undo what was given to us. So what we pass on is very different from what we received. But also, this time in history is a unique time. The only time where women actually have this opportunity. I mean, if this was 100, like our mothers didn't have this, women did not have this chance of being self aware and creating this healing in this way. Sometimes there were healers in the society earlier that were all women, but that those were the designated healers. But every woman today has a chance to be a healer and to undo what was gifted to us as trauma, gifted to us as conditioning, gifted to us as wisdom. We can pass it on. So I in my work, and I also realized, so that was one aspect of it. The second aspect of it was that I realized that women, instead of adopting this role, had actually stopped trusting themselves, right? Earlier wisdom was passed on to us as well, like I said. Now women find themselves very alone, not living in communities, having to wear multiple hats, but more than anything, outsourcing their wellness and their well-being to experts outside. With advent of social media and excessive information and this overwhelm of noise, we often forget to connect with ourselves. We are like, one diet after the other. We have this FOMO of fear of missing out on like what's the next wellness trend. So here I'm like this, every woman has this tremendous power to connect with themselves and heal. And instead, we're succumbing to these pressures of these marketers. How do we find a way to come back home into our bodies and really pass on a different legacy from what we received? And that idea was so powerful to me. It moved me so much. And I saw it happening with my clients time and again that I decided to make this my mission.
That's really, really beautiful. Do you think that, and I think you're absolutely right, that women in particular are marketed to when it does come to whether it's, quick fixes or exercise, which might not be the right kind of exercise for them, or fasting, which may not be the right kind of fasting for them. And because we're all looking for a quick fix, we just hop on sort of a bandwagon before connecting with ourselves and figuring out either with the therapist or with our doctor or with ourselves, what actually we need, not what we're being sold, isn't it? Um,
So,
yeah, just when it comes to fasting, is fasting a part of Ayurveda?
so I'll tell you the different types of fasting, and Ayurveda talks
Mm.
a ton about fasting, right?
Mm.
And I think the way we understand fasting today is like we have this like one size fits all fasting protocols.
Yeah,
Completely. Like that's like really creating disease. That's an
yeah,
invitation for disease
Mm.
and imbalance, right? By the way, I also want to say one thing because you brought up women, and one of the things that just occurred to me is that, like we talked about, I just said that there were healers of the society were earlier women. You look at tribal communities, and a lot of women wore that hat, the healers. And I think when we became so data driven, so left brain about wellness, is when actually we started getting this whole male energy into the whole medicinal world. And this is a big disadvantage for the medicinal world because what it did for us is we became so left brain and data driven about it. Which is, I'm not saying daily data is a bad thing, right? But I think it needs to be paired with the wisdom that we're missing. And women are great at carrying that intuitive wisdom. Men are not. They're just generally the masculine energy is very much more left-brained. So I think it's not served as well. Now going back to fasting, right? So fasting is a great therapy for somebody who has excess tissue or toxins. Period. If you don't have excess tissue, which is unnecessary for your body and slowing you down, or you don't have toxic waste in your body, Ayurveda talks about this toxic waste called ama, in the body, clogging your channels in the system. But if you are depleted already and you fast, and your digestive enzymes come out like they do every single day, like the sun, they come out every single day. But if you don't give it food, it's going to start eating up your mucosal lining. And a lot of women have soft lunar fluid bodies, right? Amniotic fluid, breast milk, we're so fluid. We have breasts. So women start fertility fluids, women start suffering when they're doing excessive fasting, when they cannot afford it. So fasting is great for some people for some amount of time. Fasting is not for everybody, especially those who are depleted. Everybody can fast in a way which is really not even a fast, which is how we were meant to live, is if you're going to stop eating at sunset and then start eating after sunrise, that's how you're supposed to be eating. It's
Yeah.
not fasting. We've
Yeah.
gone from living like this to now eating all the time to
Yes.
going back to where we were supposed to live and then calling it fasting.
I
That's
mean,
not
it's
how
break
it's supposed to
fast, isn't it? We're breaking our fast once we have,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
But now, if you're midnight snacking, and it's only in the last 100 years that we've created this lifestyle so that now we have a need to go
Mm,
back to how we're supposed to be living, but call it an intermittent fast. Lynn, massive, right? Like I would
mm.
say the two things that my clients find the biggest difference in is starting to eat before 6:30, dinner, small dinner, heavier lunch, but also not starting their day with something cold.
Yeah.
And they,
I love my
they
porridge now, but
oh,
yeah. Mm. So porridge or eggs, something like that, is a good start to the day.
great,
Yeah.
roasted sweet potatoes, cooked fruit, a toasted piece of sourdough toast, spiced hot milk, anything.
Mm, yeah, no, that's really good. So modern medicine doesn't always welcome complementary therapies or what are considered to be complementary therapies. But I mean, I can see Ayurveda supporting health and supporting it doesn't contraindicate with, medical protocols, really, does
It does not contraindicate at all.
mm,
No, it doesn't. And I think a lot of Ayurveda you can use your logical brain. You don't even need to get into modern science, right? Like, for
mm,
example, you can understand that we're diurnal mammals. We cannot see during uh, nighttime. So a lot of the principles can be imbibed without having the need for someone to prove it. I mean, it's just simple, plain logic, So
mm,
if we have really come to the place where we cannot trust our own logic, I mean, that's a deeper problem. But
yeah,
I'd say, and while Ayurveda is the only science that they're talking about may have the cure for Alzheimer's, a lot of neurodegenerative disorders, and it does. And you don't have to go all the way there. If you are scared of trusting Ayurveda, start in places where it's easy to imbibe it into your life. And then you do one little thing at a time. But you don't want to be last. By the time science goes on and proves it, and if it's a simple shift to your life, which does not seem crazy or harmful, but don't wait till it's proven one day.
yeah.
If it's simple, like eating an early dinner, just do it first
Mm,
and prove it. You become the experiment in your own
yeah.
body.
Exactly. And we all know when we make improvements how we feel. So, I mean, if you feel better, then obviously it's a good thing to do anyway. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all really about that inner climate and that inner balance. So I presume, particularly for women, obviously for men also, but particularly for women when it comes to their cycle, when it comes to fertility, and then obviously perimenopause and menopause. I mean, it stands to reason that if there's balance, then hormones are part of that inner climate, aren't they? And Ayurvedic practices could maybe help women who are struggling in those areas.
It is profound the amount how deep Ayurveda goes into that, right? The seasons, everything is a season, everything is a rhythm, right? So there's seasons of the year, there's seasons of the month. The beginning is a spring. When you're ovulating, it's summer. And then when we are having, the decline, everything becomes dry. You have your period. That's kind of like the autumn, you know? So Ayurveda talks about all of these cycles in such a beautiful way and what you can do to support your body. And you'll also notice those shifts inside the body when you're actually happening. You'll see the inner climate shift a little bit. So you know what to do to keep it warm and moist in different phases. But it goes even deeper than that, right? It goes into like quality of DNA, quality of the egg, quality of the sperm. I mean, it's very deep and it's very profound. And one of the most important things is that if you want to look after your hormones, you need to treat every menstrual cycle as sacred. It's a very sacred time, how you exert, how much you exert, how you live. It actually goes a long way in determining how your hormones work out.
Mm, I know, and I think that it's very easy for people to say, oh, we throw the word stress around without actually understanding sometimes how many faces that has, and sometimes it's okay, life is going great, but if you're too busy and you're burning yourself out, burning the candle at both ends, that's a stress. If you're doing the wrong exercise, that's a stress, eating the wrong foods. So yeah, anything that can bring us back into. So would that be you, when you have your framework, does that I suppose approach overall general health, and then all of these other issues are maybe um, resolved as a result of that inner balance? Or do you have different protocols for different issues that people come to you with?
Yeah, so you'll be surprised that a lot of it gets resolved with just,
Mm.
you know, fixing your inner climate, right? Because like as we said, the when the climate is right, life thrives. We've evolved into this crazy species from single cell organisms. However, that being said, no matter who comes to me with what condition, we start there. But often, depending on the condition, I will then do a round of herbs or some other specific protocols, person to person, depending on how deep their pathology is. But for a lot of simple chronic conditions, people find great relief with just this one shift.
Great, that's brilliant. Just a final question there, Nidhi. What is your vision for the future of Ayurveda and holistic health in this modern world?
My vision for Ayurveda is that I would love for everyone to go back to living in harmony with nature, to understand that everything is a rhythm. Your breath is a rhythm. Your digestive system is a rhythm. Your hormonal cycle is a rhythm. Every vibration of a cell is rhythm. The pumping of your heart is rhythm. The revolution of the sun is a rhythm. The revolution around the sun is a rhythm. The rotation of the earth is a rhythm. And if a rhythm goes off, right, for example, if it starts snowing in the summer and you're like, what just happened? You know that there is reason to worry. Similarly, I'm surprised that human beings, people menstruate at the wrong time. They're okay with it. They're like, oh, we'll see what happens next
Yeah.
cycle. That's like snowing in the spring. And you want to know that all you have to do is just go back to fixing the rhythms. And in an orchestra, right? If you have everybody's playing an instrument, beautiful music, one person goes offbeat, that music has become noise. So my vision is for people to kind of just reconnect with those rhythms in the most deepest, most intuitive manner and start going back to living like this. We will not be in this tremendous crisis, health crisis, mental health crisis that we are in. And I know that Ayurveda has you don't have to guesswork. I'm not asking you to discover those rhythms. Ayurveda has it enumerated for you. It has it listed out. Just I would love for that so that we can all live with ease and we're not marketed so heavily or at least distracted by the marketers.
Yeah, that's lovely. Nidhi, thank you so much. That is so interesting. Fascinated even more after speaking to you, so I'll definitely be looking into it some more. And I'll put links to all of your contact details and everything in the show notes. I really
Thanks
enjoy that. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thanks for your time.
for having me, Lynn. Thank you.
My thanks to Nidhi for her time and expertise, and I'll pop links to her work and her book in the show notes. So, the store cupboard staple for this episode, of course, is an Asian staple, and that's rice. It is a grain with a story that spans continents, cultures, and millennia. So, I'm going to just go through a little bit about its origins and the many varieties, and we'll also learn about the benefits that rice brings to our plates and our health. So, the history of rice begins thousands of years ago. Archaeological evidence suggests that rice was cultivated as far back as 5000 BC in India, with grains discovered in sites like Chopani Mando and Mahagara. But the earliest domestication of rice, namely Oryza sativa, took place in the Yangtze River basin of China actually about 9,000 years ago. This makes it one of humanity's oldest agricultural traditions. In South China, emperors would actually even hold annual rice ceremonies to honour this life sustaining crop, and they recognised that it had a foundational role in feeding the population. Now, rice's journey didn't stop in Asia. It spread outward first to Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and then through the usual travellers and trade, it reached Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Now, there is one type of rice, Oryza glaberrima, or African rice, and this is independently domesticated in West Africa around 3,000 years ago. And it remains important in that region, for local cuisine. Now, rice has lots of different types and flavors and textures. There are apparently about 40,000 cultivars of rice around the world, and they'd be shaped by, the regional climates and the culinary traditions. So the three types we have the Asian rice, Oryza sativa, and that has two major subspecies. Indica, which is long grain, non-sticky, common in South Asia, and Japonica, which is short grain, sticky, and that's favoured in East Asia. There are also specialities in that type, and that would include aromatic basmati and jasmine, creamy arborio, which would be used in risottos, and that glutinous sticky rice for desserts. So the second type is the one we mentioned, the African rice, the Oryza glaberrima, and it's actually also more drought resistant and it thrives where Asian rice might not. Now the third type is wild rice or zizania, and this would be native to North America and China. It's not a true rice botanically, but it has a nutty flavour and a chewy texture, so it makes it a gourmet favourite. Now, each type of rice has its own unique flavour and properties, and they enhance dishes all around the world, from sushi and biryani to jambalaya and paella. Now, in terms of the nutrition, it is, of course, a source of carbohydrates. So this provides energy for billions of people daily. The brown and the whole grain varieties in particular offer fibre, vitamins, including B vitamins for our central nervous system, and minerals like magnesium and selenium. Rice is naturally gluten free, so for anybody with celiac disease or gluten sensitivities, it's a perfect choice. So these, particularly again, the whole grain rice varieties do help because of the fiber, and they've low GI. They really help to regulate our blood sugar, promote gut health. They're lovely. Rice is lovely and easy on your gut, and they can also support heart health because it's low in fat and providing the aforementioned nutrients. Now, when it comes to carbohydrates, of course, we're looking at proportions. So for most of us, a quarter plate is plenty. Now, of course, athletes might need to carb load, or, they might need extra fuel when they have a game or training coming up. But most of us, again, a quarter plate is plenty. And we definitely don't need both rice and chips on one plate. So the next time you're out and you order a curry, you can say no to the half and half and just go with the really nutritious rice. So when we have our rice in our store cupboard, what are we going to do with it? Well, of course, the obvious is to have it with a curry or a spicy dish, but actually you can make a curried salad for barbecues at this time of year. I have a recipe for a curried salad on the website, so I'll pop that in the show notes. It's gorgeous, mixed with some vegetables and maybe some legumes. It's lovely. Maybe you could pop it into like a stuffed pepper or stuffed courgette. It is brilliant. If you have some left over, you can always fry it with some eggs to make some egg fried rice for lunch the next day. Actually, I'll put a link also to the Food Safety Authority, because you want to be careful how you store cooked rice, when you're going to eat it, say the next day. So I'll put a link to the Food Safety Authority on that too, so that you make sure that you keep it safe and bacteria free. Now, I actually love rice even with salmon. So rice and some stir fry veg or some greens is gorgeous. So we would actually have it a lot. It works with literally anything. So now when you think about rice, think about the ancient ceremonies beside the Yangtze in China and the bustling markets in West Africa. It really is a grain that nourishes both our body and our soul. It's also a healthy and indispensable choice for billions of people all around the world, giving them their daily fuel. So you're tasting history, diversity, and well-being in every grain. And hopefully there is enough information there to encourage you to add some more whole foods into your shopping trolley this week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advice or services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.